Please be seated and turn in your Bibles to Daniel chapter 11 and 12. Excuse me. And while you are doing that, if you bypass Matthew chapter 24, you can stick your finger in there, because we're going to be using that. So we're going to start with Daniel chapter 11, chapter 11 verses 29 through 39, and then I'm going to jump over to Daniel 12 verses 6 through 11. At the appointed time he will return and come into the south, but this last time it will not turn out the way that it did before. For ships of Kittim will come against him, therefore he will be disheartened and will return and become enraged at the holy covenant and take action. So he will come back and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. And forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice, and they will set up the abomination of desolation, and by smooth words he will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly before the covenant, but the people who know their God will display strength and take action. And one said to the man dressed in linen who is above the waters of the river, how long will it be until the end of these wonders? And I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, as he raised his right hand and his left toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, and as soon as they finish shattering the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed. As for me, I heard but could not understand. So I said, my Lord, what will be the outcome of these events? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for these words are concealed and sealed up until the end times. Many will be purged, purified, and refined, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but those who have insight will understand. And from the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. You heard me reading this. There were parts of it that confused you, because you have no knowledge, and I'm not planning on giving you any knowledge. So you can just kind of look at it for yourself. You have no knowledge necessarily of who's coming from the north or who's going to the south, or what forces will arise, or what smooth words. Last week we dealt with the person and our responsibility as far as why the Lord, our judgment, might place one disobedient candidate over another disobedient candidate. So let's consider again why he would choose anyone who was disobedient in the first place. Oh, yeah. The children of Israel began in the beginning being disobedient. There was the tree of knowledge of good and evil in Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. Kind of early, don't you think? In Genesis chapter 3 through 15, we have the acceptability of tithes and offerings. Cain and Abel. We didn't even get out the gate. And then we can go to the flood. You know, because we look at the flood and it's this great cleansing, right? But even after the flood, he says there's going to be people here that every intent of their heart is evil continuously. And Noah takes a nap. Okay. Who is El Shaddai? Why am I only concerned with what I desire? Who's El Shaddai? And the hits just keep on coming. Direct quote from last week, in case you don't remember. So, this is one of the things that I heard from my older children quite often. You're not the boss of me. I don't know who was. You're not the boss of me. I know this is where this takes us individually as we're looking at it. I know that I can interpret according to the will of the people on both sides of any issue. Because I have the right to interpret. And what I want is more important than your offerings. Yeah, I had a conversation this week with one person in particular, but several people, that I made the decision. I did not ask the other members of the church board. I just made the decision that I'm going to put a Bible on the altar. See, all this time that we've been here, there's been a Bible over here on the piano. Does anybody ever look at it? During the sermon, does anybody ever even see it? I think, you know, I probably would be sitting back there and going, because except for the 12 years that I was in White Cloud, I grew up and went to and pastored churches where the Bible was always on the altar, on the floor, where it was accessible to the people. That's the Baptist theology behind why there's supposed to be a Bible on the altar. And it's open because we can access it. We can read it. We're supposed to be able to understand it, except when your pastor takes something out of the middle of some big story and just throws it at you like boom. But that's where it's supposed to be, and that's what's supposed to be there. And so, now, I'm going to explain very shortly, I'm going to explain White Cloud, because White Cloud was a different. White Cloud, although it was a Baptist church, it was very Presbyterian in a lot of what it did. And in the Presbyterian church, the Bible is on the altar behind the pastor, because the pastor has to tell the people what's in it. Truth. Now, there's kind of different theologies about why that. I personally, partly because I grew up in a Baptist church, and partly because I can't figure out why I can't read the Bible for myself. I want it on the floor. And so, from now on, there's going to be a Bible on the altar. That's where it was. If you remember, those of us, yeah, I think all of us were here. Those of us that were at Central Church over in Mitchellville, we always had the Bible on the altar and down on the floor. Okay, I got in trouble for saying that to one person today, too. Why do you put the Bible on the floor? Come on, people. Don't be literal. It's on the floor on a table. Okay, there we go. All right, so, you're not the boss of me, and I can interpret Scripture the way I want to. We are at a place, though, in our society, and even in some of our congregations, where the only one with whom we are concerned is the one that we met in the mirror this morning. And the origin of this thought process is the way that we look at the Lord, at Adonai, at the way that we respond to our obligation to Him, because we do have an obligation to Him. Because right away, some of us right now are asking, what obligation do I have to Him? The way that our minds work, the way that we think, the way that the children of Israel thought. You can go back and read Exodus if you don't believe me. The way that the children of Israel thought was that He has a responsibility to us because He placed us where we are. He brought us out of our Egypt, wherever that was. And so, since He did all of that, don't you think that He has an obligation to us more than we have an obligation to Him? Can we begin with asking who you turn to first? I'm not going to ask this question the way I have it written. I'm going to ask it this way. Who do we turn to first when we're in the foxhole and people are shooting at us? Don't take that literally. But think about it. Who do we turn to first when everything goes wrong? Daniel spoke of two kings. This is back before what we read. Daniel spoke of two kings whose hearts are intent on evil continuously as they speak lies to each other. That's out of Daniel 11:27. Two kings whose hearts are intent on evil continuously as they speak lies to each other. But what's the purpose? Why is it that they are there with these lies? Do not be deceived. The Lord, our righteousness, is not mocked. He is not deceived by our own promises and our constant murmurings regarding the whys of our decisions, or regarding the bargaining that we're going to do in order to get him to do what we want him to do in our lives at any one particular time. Lord, I will go to church every Sabbath. Lord, I will quit swearing. Lord, I will drive like a normal person. Oh, not here. I drive better than the normal person in D.C. What happened? What happened? He answered your prayer somehow, and you all of a sudden said, oh, well, never mind. That's too much trouble for me. I'm not doing that. Nope, not my time. So, do you believe the words that are spoken? Or are you able to understand that we are not told one thing by the I am of our salvation that may be interpreted differently by a prophet than from what he says to us? All of our bargaining, all of our challenges, I want to know where he gave us permission to barter with him in order to accomplish what he has called us to accomplish. Give ear to the word that is handed down from the throne rather than the control that is with contradictory intent by those who want to tickle your ear in hopes of finding favor. Okay. Matthew, just for a second, I told you to have your finger in there. I didn't do what I told you to do. It ought to open right up to it because I do it all the time. Okay, here we go. There it is, okay. So, it wasn't making sense to my brain what I was looking for and what I was seeing. Okay, so here it is. Here it is. Jesus speaks of killing his prophet, not Jesus killing his prophets, but Jesus speaks of those killing his prophets and stoning those he sent to those whom he has chosen and those whom he has loved. And that causes him to weep. He would that we would be gathered as his children under his protection. But he says in Matthew 23, verse 37, that we are unwilling. We don't physically kill his prophets. But what do you think? How do you think it causes him to feel when we choose our own will, our own desire, what we see around us, how we want to interact with other people over what he has told us to do? We have chosen instead to leave his house desolate as we chase after that which we desire and that which we have chosen to be a God, small g. Moving on. We have left his temple, his tabernacle desolate, and the entirety of his people will find themselves uprooted from his land because we choose to do things, we choose to follow people, we choose to accept behaviors that he has said are not acceptable. I want you to think about this. I want you to think about this as we are thinking about the next 4 years that we're going to have in our lives and the way that we have to respond to people that are not going to lead us in the paths of righteousness. Serious. It's some of what they're saying, some of what they're anticipating for us sounds really, really good. Amazingly good sometimes. And some of it sounds just downright horrid. And then we have to deal with the other ones, on the wrong side. The other ones. We have to deal with the other ones who have their own agenda as to what humanity is supposed to do and how they're supposed to behave, and we still elect them to office. And then we grab on to 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 20. And Matthew chapter 23, verses 38 and 39. And we want to know why our prayers, when we grab a hold of 2nd Chronicles, we want to know why it is that our prayers are not being answered. Why we are not being forgiven of our sin and having our land healed. That's why I cringe every time I hear somebody quote that 2nd Chronicles passage. I cringe every time I hear it, because I know what he desires of us. I know what he expects of us. I know that most of you know what he desires and what he expects, and yet we move onward, and we have left his tabernacle desolate, and the entirety of his people trying to find out for themselves why they are uprooted and why they have no foundation. Why we have no foundation. We need to take on the mantle and proclaim, as quoted from Psalm 118:26, "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord our righteousness." Because if we do not bless him, if we do not follow him, if we do not make an attempt, if we do not make the attempt to do it, if we do not make the attempt to work towards that, because we all know we're going to fall short. But what's the intent in our heart? Because that's what he's looking at. That's what sometimes we don't share that intent in our heart because we're so frustrated with everything else that's going on. Just get out on the beltway for a minute. Because you can go out in all good humor and all of a sudden somebody just kind of, what are they doing? And you can't tell me that doesn't change our attitude. In Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 5, a desolation shall come upon this house because we walk away. Because we don't look at what we are looking for. We don't take the time to back up and walk forward. And when we stumble, back up and walk forward again. Daniel got to see the inner workings of his government. He got to hear the private thoughts of the king of Babylon. He got to hear the scheming and conniving of those behind the scene. And yet, he still managed to be true to the one Lord, our salvation. I don't recall seeing any of the sins that Daniel committed. I'm sure because there is no one perfect. And we just don't get to see that part of it. We only get to see what he does. But like Daniel, what we do in our daily lives has to be able to outshine the terrible stuff that we do. The intent of our heart has to be at a place where we can go forward with him. What concerns you most about what is going on in the inner sanctum of our United States capital city? What concerns you most about that? In Esther's time, we learned last week it was the scheming of Haman because he was jealous that Mordecai, through his niece Esther, had the ear of the king. And every time Haman tried to do something, he was out ranked by the queen. She got to the king before he did, or right after. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't seem to get ahead of the tidbits that got passed to those who were in control. So, this I brought up before. I'm not going to keep bringing it up. This is actually the last time I plan on bringing it up. And we're moving on next week to some Advent stuff, so you only have to put up with this one more time. But have you heard that there is a not-so-secret plan put together by the 2025 Haman Society to radically change American governments? See that? Yeah. In Daniel's day, King Darius, King Belshazzar, had dreams that the wise men told them how to trap those who were not in agreement with the worship policies of the kingdom. That's why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were prepared to be roasted, and why Daniel was going to be the lion's lunch. Right? Have you read the 2025 report of the commissioners and the satraps that would trap Daniel with accusations of corruption? Not saying that 2025 thing is or is not a danger. Okay? I'm only on, what did I say yesterday? Page 120 out of 900. I've been reading it for a week. I thought I'd have it done by the end of next week. I don't think that's happening. I just kind of want to know what's in it. So let us consider, as Daniel was sitting in his room contemplating, and a little horn remained, in his contemplation, a little horn remained with the eyes of a man with a little mouth, uttering great and arrogant boasts before the venerable Ancient of Days. You want a reference for that? Daniel 7, 9 through 14. Because here's the thing. A man's boasts are not able to stand against the one who is as a son of man, who is presented before the Ancient of Days, who might venture a guess at the purpose of the one whose arrogance is far beyond the normal boasts of one-upmanship. See, that's kind of one of the things that keep coming back to us when we're looking at what's going on in our country right now, because we have one side that's immoral in one way and another side that's immoral in another way, and we're trying to figure it out. And then we have a guy that grabs up a Bible. I said this last week too, but you get to listen to it twice. A guy that grabs up a Bible and runs onto the National Mall, waving it like he's got some. Sorry, I'm getting judgmental here, but you can tell me about that later. Like he has some right to tell people when his behavior tells us something entirely different from what we are supposed to be doing. When I was reading this scripture this week, working on this thing just kept jumping out at me. The horn with two eyes and a small mouth that kept uttering great and arrogant boasts before the Ancient of Days. While considering this, it is important to remember the testimony of John the Baptist in John 3:26 as he testifies that no man attending to the will of the Lord our judge can receive anything unless it has been given from the abode of El Shaddai. John 3:26 and 27. You don't get anything if it doesn't come from something higher. So, what do we do? What do we, the people of the Lord our salvation, do with one whose claim is to be blatantly or by association sent from by Scripture? There's a point at which we have to be able to discern what comes from El Shaddai and what is a sham to make others turn and consider another as Christian. Y'all know I get judgmental sometimes, right? Y'all know that. And some of what I've had to say this morning is judgmental, but there comes a point at which we have to understand James when he tells us that they will know who we are by our behavior. They will know who we are by what we do. And even if Jehovah chose one person immorality over another person's immorality to put them in the place of governance, we still have to have the responsibility to know when he is speaking to us and when he is speaking to us. I'm not pointing down, I'm pointing at the floor. You know, somebody standing on the floor with you. Because no matter how high we place our president, he still stands on the floor with you. Or as my mother always said, and probably your mother too, he puts his pants on the same way you do. You take his clothes away, he ain't nothing better than you. My mother never used that word. Okay, so we find in James chapter 2:1 that we may have a problem if we believe we are entitled because we have accepted Jesus as our salvation. Let me say that again. We may have a problem if we believe we are the word entitled. If we are entitled because we have accepted Jesus as our salvation. And it all rests on that one word that gets thrown around so much. We still are responsible to him. We still are going to go to the same direction as anybody else. We are going to stand in front of the throne. There would not be a throne if we were not going to stand in front of it. It's a mercy seat. We need to be able to understand our behavior. I'm going to try to quit saying justify our behavior, because that's what I say a lot. We need to justify our behavior. I don't think we can justify our behavior. Personal opinion. I don't think we can justify our behavior. But we have to understand our behavior. Because we have to know what we are doing, who we are doing things to, and why. We test the Spirit of His holiness when we begin testing the purpose of why, because we want to apply the parameters of our democracy as though it were a theocracy. We do not live in a theocracy. We live in a democracy. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. One, democracy, theocracy, one is not like the other. One is not like the other. We must take an in-depth look at the response that Yehoshua made to the temple elite when they asked him about his allegiance to the ruling government in Mark chapter 12, verses 13 through 17. Show me the coin whose face is on the coin. Show me the White House whose face is in the White House. I feel the floor burning here. All right, it's hypocrisy. It's playing a part that is not yours to play. That's what hypocrisy means. I told you that about 3, 4, 5 years ago. I don't remember when. I haven't preached that sermon for a while. But hypocrisy means playing a part that is not yours to play. It is hypocrisy when we attempt to put the mask of theocracy onto the face of democracy. In other words, no matter how hard we try, we are never going to have a perfect government in our country. And so for us to stand here and say that we are a Christian nation is hypocrisy. This comes again from last week. Although, as we said last week, the New England colonies were chartered as Protestant colonies, even in the beginning there were those who did not hold to the tenets of congregational rule. One of the conversations I had this week with a couple other pastors was, if we're going to say that this country is that the New England colonies were chartered as Protestant colonies to be his land, to be Jehovah's land, why did we have the Salem witch trials? Why was Roger Williams, and I can never remember the woman that had to leave with him. Why was it that Roger Williams was kicked out of the Massachusetts colony? Because he believed, this is not the only thing he believed, but it's what everybody in Baptist churches throws at you, because he believed in believers' baptism. You need to study your history. It's way more complicated than that, but that's what we say. Why did we accept that? Why did the Massachusetts Bay Colony feel like they could step beyond what the Word of Jehovah says and impose that on other people? And yet there are certain questions of morality that we need to maintain as core values no matter where we, the children of Jehovah, exist. We need to look at morality, we need to understand morality, where science, where fact meets the boundaries of moral justice. We are asked to face the trial of the basic integrity of what is correct. And this test of faith helps us to endure the torment of holding on to what is right and what is proper. Wisdom is the ability to know and hold on to that which does not cross the line of degradation. We're called to ask for forgiveness and faith without doubting, so as to be a moral compass in an immoral society. See, we get these things thrown at us, these ideas, these purposes that people have. Take your pick: abortion, gender dysphoria, whatever. Take one. Who cares? Because we get challenged by it. And you know what? Some of it sounds really good. me tell you the one that really gets me every time I have to deal with it. And if you argue abortion, you should never argue anything. I'm not smart enough to know that. All right? If you argue abortion, I have a real problem with telling a woman who has been forced into intercourse. I don't want to say the R word. I have a real problem with telling her she has to carry another man's child. I have a problem with that. I have a worse problem with children, specifically female, but it's not always female, but because of abortion, I'm only going to use the female side of it, okay? I have a problem with telling a young girl that because her father doesn't know how to behave and doesn't know how to stay in his own bed, that she's pregnant. I don't know how to deal with it. Why does she have to have that child? And these are rhetorical questions, so don't come to me and explain it to me. I know all the explanations, okay? I do know them, and I still stand where I stand. But, you know, that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying that sometimes we look at these things and we have to ask these questions because there are real moral questions here that contradict each other. So, we have to have the wisdom and the ability to hold on to that which does not cross the line of degradation. We are called to ask for guidance in faith without doubting, so as to be a moral compass in an immoral society. Because in a moral society, those things would not happen. The church is the earthly presence of that which the Lord, our Creator, brought into being, whether our unchurched brothers like it or not. Brothers and sisters. Church is the earthly presence of that which our Creator brought into being, whether the unchurched like it or not, whether the atheists like it or not, whether the agnostics like it or not. The atheists can't even answer that question. Science, this is one of the issues that we get into sometimes because we want to argue things that we shouldn't be arguing. Science is created by the Lord our Creator and is not going to change because we just want to get along. Science is science is science. And if He created everything, He created science. So, when we swing with the current, we are what James 1:7 calls surf driven by every wave of the wind that blows. Those who do not stand on the word as it is given should expect nothing from the Lord our righteousness. He will not tempt us, and those who change the word to fit are carried away and enticed by their own lust. Turn to James chapter 1. I can never find James. There it is. James chapter 1. I'm going to read you verses 12 through 18. Blessed is a man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised those who love him. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil. He himself does not tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then, when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. Do not be deceived. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. Every good thing bestowed and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shifting shadow. In the exercise of his will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, so that we might be, as it were, the first fruits among his creatures. That's your responsibility. Let's turn to number 563. Count your blessings as our closing. to him who is able to do exceeding abundantly beyond all that we ask or think, according to the power that works within us. To him be the glory in the church and on Jesus Christ through all generations, forever and ever. Amen.